Look who's with me. It's the Professor. Hey, Damo.
Hey, Jake. How are you, mate?
How are you?
Okay.
I'm good. Yeah, very well. Yourself?
Yeah, good. We've had a interesting period, haven't we, with the book coming out and the tour tickets being announced. It's been incredibly exciting.
But even more important than that, have you done your Christmas shopping?
Not yet. No, I've not even thought about it. I mean, a reactor.
That's not high performance. What are you talking about, man?
I'll be a high-performance Christmas Eve shopper.
There you go.
Desperately.
There you go. Right. So let's explain to you what we're planning to do today. This is our wrap up for the latest series of High Performance. We've done this a few times. You guys have really loved it. You've got loads from it. So we thought we'd do it again. And I think if you're the kind of person that listens to this podcast, you're also the kind of person that understands that we are not fixed. We are beings that grow, we change, we develop, we evolve all the time. And Damian, there's been a lot of research that has uncovered 5 key pillars to change. And that's what we're going to focus on today by looking back on the guests who joined us over the past few weeks.
Yeah, so this research that we've drawn on for every one of our series reviews comes from the work of Dr. Joseph Campbell. Now, to remind anyone that hasn't heard it before, Joseph Campbell was a sociologist that spent the first part of the last century going to the most diverse cultures in the world and asking a really simple question: what unites us? And one of the things that is common to all of us as humans is how we make change happen, how transition, how we go from good to great, how we go from wherever we are to where we want to be. And what Dr. Campbell identified was there was 5 key stages that we all pass through. So the first stage is what he described as the dream stage, where we get ourselves excited and identify where we want to go. Then the leap stage is we do something different than what we were doing yesterday to move ourselves forward. The messy middle is the fight stage, the bit that so many of our guests talk about, where things go wrong, setbacks occur, morale declines, but they find a way of persevering. And the longer they spend there, they eventually get to the climb stage where they see progress, they see a degree of momentum that takes them to the arrival stage where they celebrate, and that's where they plan to go again.
I think this is a good episode for a pen and paper, because I remember a few months ago, we spoke with Jo Malone, and she described to us that when she had her breast cancer diagnosis, she suddenly had all these plans for how she was going to live differently. And then she said that over time, those lessons fell through her hands like sand, was the phrase that she used. You know, just trying to grab hold of sand falling through your fingers is something we can all understand. And I think that's what happens often with these podcasts. You know, part of the reason we wanted to write our new book was that we know people hear these podcasts, they think, I'm going to react to that, I'm going to live differently. But then over time, they forget and they move on and life evolves. So the book was about having a daily reminder in your house of the lessons of this podcast. And that's really what these wrap-up episodes are about. It's just reminding you of those little moments you've heard that perhaps you've forgotten already. We're going to remind you about them, and we're going to talk about ways you can implement them in your daily life. So let's get straight into it then. Let's start where we all do when it comes to change, something that everyone listening to this podcast, I hope, had as a child, but crucially still has today, and that is the dream. Here is one of the greatest rugby players of all time, Dan Carter, on the power of dreams.
I stumbled across my personal purpose, and it was, looking back now, I'm just so grateful that I had that vision, that purpose. And that came about when I walked off the field in 2003 after playing my first test for the All Blacks. So if I rewind back to a 5-year-old Dan Carter, it was the inaugural Rugby World Cup. I was 5 years old. It was here in New Zealand, co-hosted with Australia. And one of the first games, the All Blacks played Italy. And from one of the kickoffs, John Heughan got the ball, and he beat 11 players to score this incredible try. It was one of the most amazing tries. And as a little 5-year-old kid, I'm like, man, he's my hero. So I went straight outside and I was pretending to score tries like John Heughan. Now, the All Blacks went on to win that World Cup. And I remember watching David Kirk, who was captaining that game, holding the William Webb Ellis Cup above his head. And as a 5-year-old, I don't remember a lot from when I was 5 years old, to be honest, but I remember that moment of going, I want to be an All Black.
What a clip. What a guy. And I think that one of the saddest things, Damien, is when we get to a point in our life where we stop dreaming. And I think this is an important message for people. There's that great old phrase, isn't there? When is the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago. When's the second best time? Right now. So whatever stage people are at in their lives, I don't want them to think, oh, I've gone beyond the dream stage. I think this is there for anyone at any time. And as soon as we lose that, I think we lose so much more than just dreams.
Definitely. I think one of our other guests in this series, we'll talk about him later, was Will Ahmed, that said that when you have a dream, you almost make a deal to be dissatisfied with your current state until you get where you want to be. And I think a dream just gives us that chance of, letting our mind wander with the focus of where do we want to be, what do we want to have, and who's the person that we want to become. Asking questions like that of ourselves start to elicit some really quite powerful deals that we're making with ourselves of where we want to get to.
I think what's important to point out for you all here is that the dream is not enough. It's the way that you put that dream together. Because one thing we've learned on the High Performance podcast and one of our regular conversations is to be focused on the process, not focused on the outcome. And almost everyone we speak to on this podcast they've told us that when they get to that big moment, or what they considered when they were younger to be the big moment, the moment of happiness, that is when suddenly everything's going to make sense and it's all going to be fine. That is not the way the world works. If you're the kind of person that is listening to this podcast, if you're the kind of person that is into a growth mindset, if you're the kind of person that wants to grow and evolve and develop and progress in life, when you reach a certain point, that doesn't stop. So it's not just about having a dream, it's the way that you have a dream. And we spoke with Susie Ma a few seasons ago on the pod, and she described to us infinite purpose. And the point of infinite purpose is that the goal, the ambition, the dream, it has no end. So for example, the infinite purpose of this podcast is every single day to reach more people and get them closer to a high performance life. That has no full stop. It will never end. We can do this for 1,000 years and we will still be trying to reach more people and get them closer to a high performance life. So I don't want you listening to this to think, yeah, okay, my dream is to achieve X or to get to this place. Because then you fall in the trap of saying to yourself, I'm not happy, life's a bit of a struggle, things are a bit difficult. But when I get to my dream place, that's when I'll be happy. And I honestly believe that so many of us are walking around delaying happiness for the moment that we achieve something. But we can't do that. You've got to find the happiness in the process, because it won't be as great when you get to that point. And there will never be a moment where there's no issues and no worries and no concerns. So happiness has to be now. You need to find the happiness while chasing the dream. This is about process, Damian, not outcome.
Definitely. And I think that's where the next stage comes from in terms of the leap stage, that once you've got that dream, the process then is about doing something different, taking the leap to start adopting just different habits, different behaviors, different decision-making that starts to move you closer to where you want to get to. So a really good example of that, Jake, was when we had the real fortune of interviewing Angela Ruggiero, who became one of the greatest ice hockey players in the sport's history. But she told us how she'd grown up in California and had this dream of wanting to play ice hockey, but her first experience of it was a pretty brutal, sobering reminder of where she was starting from. If we go back to that first instance where you were cut from the boys' team, how did you learn to process failure in such a healthy way?
Yeah. Well, my father was really helpful, actually. Definitely one of my mentors growing up. He said, and my brother made the team, by the way, which was my younger brother. I was like, you get to go, man. My father said, look, you can quit or sulk, or you can work that much harder and not just be the third or fourth best. Like, you have to be the best, and the best by a long shot for you to make the team next year. And that's your choice, Angela. Like, you don't have to play hockey. And I said, no, I want to, I'm going to come back bigger, stronger, faster. And again, he gave me a choice. I think was the biggest thing. And it's always the road less traveled, but everything in life to me is a decision. And so when I do get cut or fail or get told no, I do sales every single day. I get told no all the time. But then you get the yes, and wow, how great does that feel? And so I think I just anticipate, what am I going to take from this experience, whether I win, whether I lose, whether I get cut or, make the team. But my father, I think, laid that groundwork as a young person to recognize everything in life is a choice.
I think the powerful thing there, Jake, what Angela is saying is that nobody gets to be a high performer by accident. Nobody sleepwalks their way to high performance over a sustained period. At some stage, we all have to make a choice, a decision a leap, that we want to go after it and we're prepared to meet the bill that's being demanded from us.
And I think it's important for people that are thinking, yeah, I get what you're talking about, the leap, it's great. There might be something amazing on the other side, but I'm scared about that. And I think what we need to explain to people listening to this is that fear is the prerequisite to bravery. You cannot be brave without feeling fear, because getting past the fear is the bravery. And beyond the fear is the joy and the fulfillment and the success and the journey.
Yeah.
And I think it's very hard because we're all brought up to believe that setbacks, and well, the very phrase setbacks, right, is the wrong phrase. We're brought up to believe that setbacks set you back. I'd love to reframe them as set forwards, because I think at the time it can be difficult, but actually it's that set forward that makes you realize, okay, that went wrong. That was difficult. That was a challenge. But there's two things. A, I've learned from it, but B, I've shown myself that I can keep going. I can still delve into that pot. I can still find that bravery, because, you know, everyone has fears. Everyone has worries. And we look at successful people and think, well, they can't be worried at all because they went for it. But I think we need to realize that the place where fear exists is also where you keep your courage. And once you delve in there and you find the fear, keep going and you'll find the courage. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely. I think that phrase you said there about seeing it as set forwards is really powerful. I remember hearing Kerry Evans, who's a psychiatrist that worked with the New Zealand rugby team. He encouraged the New Zealand players not to give feedback on each other, but to feed forward. So if you see somebody's behaviour, don't talk about what they did in the past. Go and make suggestions on what they can do differently into the future. And I think you're right. I think once we start to reframe those challenges from that, it means that fear becomes something not that cripples us, but it inspires us to want to go and do something different that moves us towards making our dream a reality.
There you go, people. We no longer use the word setback on this podcast, right? We use set forward. We set forward. I want to play another clip actually when it comes to leap. And this is from the businessman, Steve Morgan. I mean, what a guy. He's self-made. He's made billions. He's given hundreds of millions of pounds away to charity. He is the epitome of a man who lives a purpose-driven life. But that doesn't mean to say that it's all been success. And I sometimes hear people say, oh yeah, I've heard you do this podcast, but I don't really want to listen to a podcast that's just people talking about their successes. Now that's when I know they don't listen, because it's only when you actually listen to high performance, you realize that every single high performance empire was built on high failure and struggle and setback and challenge. And Steve Morgan shared this really moving story with us about how one of the most tragic and difficult periods in his life actually directly led to the success that he's enjoyed for so many years. Here's Steve Morgan. Can we talk about your brother who passed away in a motorcycle accident? Yeah. How much did that reframe your perspective on life?
It completely changed my life. And I always think that, I'm not a religious person, but my look totally changed when Jimmy died. We were really short of work, and as I say, I'm not a person that can sit still at all. I've always got to be doing something, and I didn't have enough work, and that was in 1977. And so I decided, I bought some Rolls Royces actually, old ones, old bangers, and the pound to the dollar was almost 1 to 1. And you know what? I can sell these out in America for twice the price, and literally they were double the price out in America. So I thought, well, I'll go out there. I went out to America, went to California, really loved it. I thought, looked at what they were doing out there, and I thought, you know what, we can seriously do some damage out here. And so Pam and I decided to emigrate to California. I'm not qualified at anything, so I couldn't get a visa, but she could, because she was an SRN, she was a trained nurse. So she, under her job, she had a job lined up. We were all set to go, and then tragically my brother got killed in a motorbike accident. He was only 17. He went to pick up his pal from work, and a car pulled out in front of him, and that was that. My mum, who just was just going through a divorce with my dad at the time. Was just beside herself, almost suicidal, really. She was completely beside herself. Jimmy was the last one living at home. My sister had already married and gone. I'd already gone. We said, we can't do this. We're going to have to stay because I can't leave her. Again, it was one of those lucky breaks for me, because to me it was like Jimmy pulling the strings from heaven, because my look completely changed almost on the spot. We got a contract, and there was no contracts around. We got a £40,000 contract to put a footpath right round the Great Orme in Llandudno. 40,000 doesn't sound like a lot of money today, but in those days for us it was a massive, massive job. And that saw us through the winter. And then the work just kept coming in. And also the decision not to go to California, we decided to start a family. So 9 months later, literally 10 months after Jimmy died, my eldest son was born. So it was life-changing. So from tragedy, something really good happened.
I remember the emotion in the room, actually, Damian, when we were talking with Steve about that. And I would just say to people listening to this very quickly, like, there are really well-known people on this podcast, Dan Carter, Mark Webber, Mark Cavendish, Michael Bisping. Go and listen to some of the names of the people that you know slightly less about, because those are the stories that are going to impact you even further. And Steve Morgan's episode is one of the great conversations we've had on this podcast. And it comes right back, Damian, to one of the cores of the high performance conversation that we have, which is fault versus responsibility. Yep. Steve Morgan realized very quickly that, of course, it was never his fault that his brother had died in that accident, but it's still his responsibility to gather himself and to go again. And there are so many examples and incidents of things that are not our fault, derailing people, ending the dream, stopping the ambition, putting out the fire. We need to realize that it is the fault. We need to realize that even though those things have happened, it's about our responsibility to deal with them. It's not about apportioning blame and apportioning fault and allowing those things to derail us.
Yeah. And I think that anybody listening to this that thinks, well, yeah, I know that. Well, we should do. This stuff has been around for a long time. Over nearly 100 years ago, the famous psychologist Albert Bandura was looking at people that were working on the roads in Canada and building the highways, and looking at those that had high self-efficacy, was the phrase he used, those that took responsibility, versus those that had low self-efficacy, that were quick to find blame and apportion responsibility elsewhere. And what he was seeing is the ones that had the high levels of self-efficacy and took responsibility tended to be successful. That led to a whole field of positive psychology that we're fortunate enough today to sit here and listen to people that are demonstrating the same principles that have been around for over 100 years now.
Is there also an argument here, Damian, that often it can be something that it almost feels to me like Steve Morgan attributed a lot of that success after his brother's death to his brother. He kept saying, didn't he, in our interview a few times, it was almost like he was looking down on us. It was almost like he was pulling the strings. It was almost like he was in control. And I think that what his brother's death did is it gave Steve some purpose. It meant he was pushing on in honor of his brother. He was staying in the UK in honor of his brother. And actually, that sense that there was bigger things at play would have changed the way Steve operated. It would have made him more driven. It would have made him more ambitious. He would have taken no for an answer much more difficult. He wouldn't have taken no for an answer as easily. So therefore, that's what actually transformed his business. And it's almost a reminder that, of course, we don't want to go through what Steve went through, but finding that purpose, finding that drive, finding that edge, as a lot of our guests call it, the edge is what makes the difference. And sadly, it was the death of his brother that gave Steve the edge. But it also gave Steve that success that he's built his entire business on.
Yeah. And again, this is open to all of us, whether you consider your edge to be a brilliant mum or dad, or whether it's a brilliant teacher, or whether it's just making a difference in your community or making an edge in business. Whatever your edge is, and that is a great way of describing it, With that then gives you a clue as to where your sense of purpose is and where you should be spending your time, because that's where your strengths are, and that's what puts you in a state of flow. That enables you to deal with the challenges in the next stage that we talk about here, which is what is referred to in Joseph Campbell's research as the fight stage, but Brené Brown often talks about the messy middle stage. It's also often referred to as Cantor's Law, where everything looks like a failure in the middle. This is a stage that everybody is going to experience. There's an awful lot of ways of referencing it. But again, what's been fascinating in this series is the amount of our guests that wouldn't tell us about that this is a place where some of their greatest lessons were handed out to them.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what then. Let's hear from a few different people. We're going to bring you some clips here. First of all, you're going to hear from Mark Webber, the Formula One driver, about the challenges he faced at Red Bull. And then another Mark. This is Mark Cavendish, who went through a really difficult mental health period. And he talks to us about how that depression impacted him. So here's Mark Webber, followed by Mark Cavendish. Do you remember when you first became aware of that side of Formula One? I guess it probably was at Red Bull that the political element of being a Formula One driver came to the fore.
Yeah, I think middle of the field there is some politics, but when you're at the front going for Grand Prix victories and World Championships, it does become a little bit more prevalent in terms of what's at stake in terms of some of the politics around that, and they could be good for you as well, like equipment and engines and rules and so it Red Bull or any team, we've got two teams, so you could say, well, that's political because they've got two teams on the field and they've got more votes, and so it's like I would benefit from that. And when it comes to some of your press positions or your statements, it's like, mate, don't go down that alley because we're doing something else further down the road, which would be assistance to everything else. So you learn. It's a big you got to navigate your way through all of those things, whether it's stuff that gets in the public or stuff that stays. Yeah. Well, you got to learn fast, mate. Yeah, and obviously I wasn't overly PC, so that was sometimes probably wasn't great for me in that sport. I could have been probably a little bit more smoother on basically keeping people happier longer, or putting more effort into the relationships that I found a bit shallow. It's like, well, this is just not my type of people, and I'm not going to put the relationship in there. And that was something that I probably could have been better at, but I still to this day feel happy with that's how I handle it, because that's what type of guy I am. But I think that I suppose the money at stake, mate. Obviously, there's a lot at stake here, and you sort of find out that it is now. This is now, we're right at the arrowhead of this juggernaut of a business. It is huge, and you are not a light bulb, but you are nearly a light bulb, mate.
I think the word depression, people then think you're just going to be sad. You're not even sad. You just don't feel anything, do you know? Yeah. And you can be sad and things, but it's not a sadness. It's like something will get to you. And it's an irrational. It gets you quite irrationally. Like, it doesn't make sense why something's annoyed you or why you're irritable about it.
So what sort of things in that period would you react strangely to?
Okay, I know like houses are noisy and kids going up, but like when sometimes I'd hear every individual sound that was going on with the kids, and then even my wife Pia, like her walking would be like I just want to go out the house. Like her walking in the house, and she's my best friend, and we never argue, and like stuff like we never do, and like stuff like that, like her walking annoying me. Like, I think about it now. By the time you don't think about it, and you don't think that's stupid because you don't know that whatever's going on. You just, you either have no feeling or just the most erratic, like, feelings that don't make sense.
So I think the biggest thing for people here, Damian, is that we all walk around with this, like, we're proud of this bulletproof belief we've got that I'm going to be okay and nothing's going to derail me. And you see it all the time, particularly among young men, this sort of macho belief that I can get through anything. That is not a positive. That is not helpful, because actually, if you believe everything's going to be fine, and then you either have the kind of challenges that Mark Webber faced at Red Bull, or you have physical or emotional challenges that Mark Cavendish faced, suddenly that belief that you're rock solid and you're good and you're going to go through life with no challenges, and then you have those challenges, you're not equipped to deal with them because you didn't expect them. Isn't it a far better approach to life to expect the problems, to expect the difficulties, because then when they come, they don't derail us. When they come, we feel we're equipped to deal with them. And when we come, we knew they were on their way, so we're going to come out the other side and go again, knowing that there may well be more challenges in the future.
100%, Jake. I think when we sort of walk around believing that we're invincible, or whether we're completely immune to life's challenges, that's what Chris Hoy told us was the Father Christmas syndrome. And the moment that life does put you on your backside and you do come up against it, you can't conceive of it, and therefore you find it more difficult than ever that these things have happened. So I think when we sort of get into this mindset of, it's like the old Mike Tyson quote that everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the face. We all need to plan that life will occasionally come and punch us in the face and put us on the seat of our pants. So having a plan for how we're going to handle those moments leaves us far better equipped to be able to deal with them effectively and to keep ourselves on track to high performance when they do inevitably occur.
And I know what some of you are thinking. I don't want to have a plan for when it goes wrong, because that's negative. But it's not about thinking negatively, bad things are going to happen. It's actually thinking positively, right? Life's going to be great. I'm going to achieve what I want. I'm going to get to a place where I feel fulfilled. However, on the way, I know there's going to be challenges and difficulties and setbacks. What we're not saying to you is focus on the negativity, focus on the setback, focus on the challenges. All we're saying is focus on the success. Know you're going to be okay, but just know that it's not a linear line. If you were to draw success on a piece of paper, it wouldn't just be a graph that goes whoop and straight up. It basically looks like a child's scribbled drawing, because that is the route to success. It goes all over the place. Sometimes it's high, sometimes you're low, sometimes you're behind your peers, sometimes you're ahead of them, but you're on your own journey and there are going to be difficulties. So don't focus on the fact it's all going to be bad. Focus on the fact it's going to be good, with some bad moments that you need to push through to get to the good.
Yeah, brilliant. And I think that's very much the theme of our conversation that we had with the MMA world champion, Michael Bisping, who described the humiliating experience of being knocked out in a world title fight, that knowing that he needed to carry on fighting in order to provide the life for his family that he dreamt of himself.
And it was the biggest pay-per-view of all time at that time. And I got knocked out in the most horrendous fashion. The guy hit me with an overhand right. I went down. I was already unconscious, and the guy leapt through the air. And there's images of it. If you Google UFC 100 and my name, he's like airborne, and he lands with his forearm on me. And everyone said, he's done. He's done. He will never, ever come back from a knockout like that. And history has shown us time and time again, when a fighter gets knocked out like that, they can't come back. And I remember actually that my next fight was at the MEN. And I wasn't the main event because I'd just been knocked out. I was a little further down the card. And all the journalists, they were always kind of trying to bother me for my time and things like that. And I remember I was in the locker room, just getting wrapped up. And this journalist that used to always speak to me walked in, and I turned around. I thought he was going to chat to me, and he just went right past me. Didn't even give me the time of day, And I was like, and that really pissed me off, And I just, but that anger, that feeling disrespected, that drove me, because I wanted to prove everybody wrong. Everyone thought I was finished. And as I said, that wasn't the only time. There was 3 or 4 times throughout my career I got to the number one contender matchups. And that's a great position to get to. I got myself to fight, a title eliminator, but I did that several times. And every time I failed. I failed at those hurdles, and everyone said, it's never going to happen. But I never gave up. I always believed in myself. I always knew if I made tweaks and I adjusted this and I adjusted that and I did this a little different in training camp, and maybe my nutrition was better, or maybe I ran some extra miles in the morning, or I got better at jiu-jitsu, whatever it was, there was always something that I clung to, and I never gave up hope.
Brilliant. I failed. He says it himself. I failed. And there was always areas to improve. And that is a man who became a UFC world champion, the first Briton to ever get there. So we've spoken about dreaming and the importance of that. And then we've leapt, and we've heard from Angela Ruggiero and Steve Morgan. And then we fought with Mark Webber, Mark Cavendish and Michael Bisping. I think it's time to climb. I think it's time to remind ourselves that this is what it's all about. It's about doing the everyday, world-class basics that we talk about on high performance. And I like to talk about these things as a bit like packing your parachute. There's loads of things that you need to go through, loads of steps when you pack a parachute to get it right. It's exactly the same mentally. You've got to pack things into your brain. You've got to do things in your daily life. You've got to work hard to implement everyday world-class basics that are going to protect you when you need it and that are going to uplift you when the moment comes. Let's hear from Mel Robbins, the brilliant motivational speaker from the United States. She discussed the importance of a high five in the mirror first thing in the morning.
It was the second morning, you guys, that it really hit me. So let me tell you what happened on the second morning, because this is crazy. So I wake up, same problems, same overwhelm, same anxiety, same beat down. I 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, get out of bed. I make the bed. I start walking toward the bathroom, and that's the moment I felt something I have never felt before. You know, when you are about to meet a friend and you're about to walk into a pub or a cafe and you're going to have a beer or you're going to have like a coffee with somebody you really like, what do you feel in that moment when you're about to walk into the pub?
Excitement.
Oh, you feel great.
Yeah.
Did you have that feeling?
I did. I actually felt excited to see.
About what?
To see the human being, Mel Robbins. You know,
what were you saying to yourself, Mel, when you put your hand on the glass?
You don't have to say anything. And I felt it before I even got to the bathroom. And this is the part that had me really wake up. I am going to be 53 years old this year. I don't ever remember experiencing the feeling of being excited to see the human being, Mel Robbins, in a mirror.
So what Mel was saying there, Jake, is that one simple exercise of giving yourself a high five in the mirror has been proven that it can improve your happiness by over 37%. And yet you don't have to take a pill, or it doesn't cost you a penny to give yourself a fighting chance of doing it, to create some momentum in your own life. And it's a great example of the climb stage. This is about the process, the small steps we can take that keep us moving forward.
I know there'll be people listening to this that think high five in the mirror first thing in the morning, but the science says it works. And I think the key thing for this podcast is all we're asking you to do is have an open mind. You definitely don't have to agree with everything you hear. You certainly don't have to do all the things that the people recommend you do or replicate the lives that they've lived. All we're saying is have an open mind, see if it works for you, give it a go. And as Damian says, the science actually proves that giving yourself a high five in the mirror will make you happier. And you know what? All of this constant talk about high performance and these great achievers and these amazing lives, is there actually a point to any of it unless it makes us happy? I don't think there is. And I think that certainly from my perspective, Damian, I started this podcast thinking life was all about the scrap and the battle, and I wanted people to hear how hard it is. Now, all I want people to hear is that these are simple, everyday, world-class basics that you can employ in your life that will get you closer to happiness and fulfillment. Because actually, that's kind of all that matters, isn't it?
Definitely. And I think the next clip that we'll hear is somebody that understood that was literally engaged in that daily fight and that daily struggle when he was the press secretary for Britain's Prime Minister, Tony Blair. And he spoke to us really quite movingly about the impact that had had on his mental health and how these world-class basics could be described in his metaphor of being a jam jar and making sure that everything in that jam jar was in place that would lead to his ultimate happiness and satisfaction.
And then a bigger thing, which I got actually writing the book and making the film about depression, was my jam jar, which is this woman who told me that look at your life as a jam jar. So down the bottom of the jam jar is the sediment, that's your genes, and then the rest of your jam jar is your life. And it's most of the time you can manage it. It's good and bad, and it's mixed stuff you remember, stuff you don't. But when the jam jar gets full, it means you can't cope, the lid explodes, and your life explodes, and you're ill, okay? And she said, what you need to do is, rather than think about undoing everything inside the jam jar, is grow the jam jar, right? Add the layers that allow you more space to put more of your life. So I honestly didn't know what she was talking about, but then I ruminated. A few days later, I got up in the middle of the night, I woke in the middle of the night, about 4 o'clock. I went downstairs, and it's on my wall at home now. I drew my own jam jar. Sediment, life. And then I've got, and this is personal to me, right? This is the first one's FFF, Fiona, family, friends, right? If my key relationships are strong, if my kids are reasonably happy, if Fiona and I are getting on, if I've got a small number of close friends that I totally trust, that's not a bad start. Meaningful activity, which means work, but it also means changing the world.
Yep.
Then sleep, diet, exercise, which I never used to take seriously, and now I do. Then it means it's the things that are really personal to me. So Burnley Football Club, bagpipes, scenery, Elvis, Jack Brel, ABBA, my bike, my dog.
Yeah.
Right, these are the things that matter to me. Then it's the thematic stuff like curiosity. Never go to bed without knowing something you didn't know when you got up in the morning. Creativity, for me, is important. I have to write something every single day. And the thing is, I'm up here already with my jam jar, and I haven't even mentioned medication, which I take every day.
Life and the right approach to it can be your medication. We should probably say as a caveat here that if you are struggling, then please don't take our word for these things. It's very important to go and see a doctor and to speak to people, particularly medical professionals. But I actually think, Damian, that is probably the most important and powerful 2 or 3 minutes that we've ever recorded on the High Performance Podcast, because I think we're all stuck in this belief that, particularly when it comes to mental health problems, that we're dealing with things that are out of our control. And as Alistair showed there, of course, medication is important. Of course, talking to people is important, but giving yourself the right tools and the right equipment and changing your approach to life literally can be your medication. He said it himself. He hadn't even thought about his medication, yet he had this whole building block of positive things to deal with. And I don't think that we have to be struggling with our mental health to realize that it's important to put those building blocks in place. I would love everyone listening to this to realize now that they can put building blocks in place for their life, even if they feel like they're in a brilliant place right now and everything's in flow and everything's fantastic, because it will still get them further forwards. And then the great thing is when they do have the falter and the struggle and the issues that we've already spoken about, those tools and the equipment that they've already got will suddenly be their parachute.
Yeah, which again echoes previous guests that we've had on. Matthew McConaughey's Great Green Lights is a great example of what you've just described there, Jake, of look for when things are going well. That's often where we take it for granted. And yet they're the moments where we should be paying attention. So when we hit the red lights, we can go back to those moments where success has been occurring and work out what were we doing differently then. Like Matthew said, like Alistair said, it might be the people we're surrounding ourselves with. It might be that we're not taking care of our diet or our sleep or exercising enough. And it can often be quite simple steps we can take that get us back into that flow state and allow us to keep climbing on the journey to high performance.
And I think the other thing to remember here is about communication. You know, I remember having a mental health episode when I was younger, Damian, and I went to see someone. And the best advice that this lady gave me was that my issue was with and we've spoken about it on the podcast before, haven't we? We discussed it with Mark Cavendish, like these intrusive thoughts that I thought basically meant that I was mentally ill and, you know, wasn't fit to be on the earth. She explained to me that these are actually incredibly common. But the problem is young men especially suffer with intrusive thoughts. They overthink them and then they end up doing really tragic things. And her brilliant advice to me was just allow them to be there. Just allow these issues to float around, but don't give them any credence. They're not real. It's your brain kind of playing a trick. And it was that moment of release and the moment of freedom that was absolutely the path that I took to the place I am today, where I feel fantastic from a mental health perspective. And I think that's a good message for people, is sometimes just having that release and accepting that, certainly from a mental health perspective, like it is a journey and there is going to be highs and lows for absolutely everyone. And in this world where we're constantly looking at perfect lives on Instagram and comparing ourselves to other people, everyone is going through these kinds of struggles and these turmoil.
Yeah. And I think the fact that you're sharing what clinical psychologists refer to as ANTs, automatic negative thoughts, means that we normalize it for other people, just like you're doing, like Alistair's done, like Mark Cavendish did when he was speaking about it. And I think the more we can get comfortable that this is our brain, the way that it's operating as it's intended to do. But one of the other phrases we regularly use, Jake, is don't believe everything you think. You know, just because these automatic negative thoughts are there doesn't mean that we have to give them the attention that they're demanding from us. We can change the narrative by changing our own stories.
And stories is a key one. I think many people write negative stories about the future, then choose to believe them, and then worry about the negativity. I've seen it all the time. And one of the phrases I use when I speak to people about this, I just say to them, look, it's your brain playing a trick. Just choose not to believe the trick. And even better than that, write a positive story and choose to believe the positive story. But the recurring theme there is when people talk to me, for anyone listening to this, if you've put off speaking to someone about your issues and your concerns, I would just recommend talking. And for those of you who feel in a brilliant place, just keep asking your friends how they are. And I think one of the best ways to do it is say, hey, how are you doing? And when they say, yeah, I'm great, thanks. That is an automatic response. That is not the actual answer. Just follow it up. And Damian's given this advice before. Follow up with, yeah, but how are you really? Yeah. And that's when you get the truth, Damo.
Yeah, it's the famous second question. It's that always follow it up with a second question that gets to the heart of that immediate rebuttal and moves us forward into getting into really understanding each other and empathizing.
Great. Helpful stuff, I hope, for you. And then the moment of arrival comes. Now, let's just caveat this with the fact that we believe on High Performance that there is no real arrival.
Yeah.
However, there are these moments, these big moments in your life that I think it's really important that you celebrate them, that you realize that they are a key moment. So what should we go with and why at this point, Damo?
Yeah, I think a great example of the arrival stage is one of the most powerful interviews we've done on the podcast, Jake, which was John McAvoy, who went from being one of Britain's most wanted men, living a life as a high-performing criminal, to then becoming one of the world's best Ironman triathletes.
I was in a concrete coffin. And I remember, like, when I was doing the cell circuits and the training on the RAN machine, like it was these small incremental steps. You don't jump from A to B. It's tiny, so small that sometimes you don't even notice you're getting better. But it's just that constant pursuit of making sure you put yourself in the position when it's ready to take the opportunity when it presents itself. And having resilience. Like, it isn't easy, mate. Like, it is hard. We all know it's hard. It's not easy. Like, no one gives you anything in life for nothing. Like, when I got out of prison, I was sleeping in my mum's spare room. I had no money. I was training people in the local park for 35 quid. But I had this absolute belief that I would become successful being an athlete. And you're talking about a man that was, like, again, locked in that cage, got released from prison. I had nothing. I couldn't even afford rent when I got released from prison. And my mum was letting me sleep in the spare room. But I used to get up every morning. And I remember sitting there talking to my mum once, and I said to my mum about, I knew I had the ability because I did what I did in prison.
Yep.
And I said, I don't just want to be a builder. And my mum said, just keep doing what you're doing.
So how did you overcome? There's a fascinating bit of research that relates back to the Vietnam War, where there was a huge concern amongst, like, the American military that a lot of the soldiers, when they were in Vietnam, became heroin addicts and it was often to cope with the war and the trauma and the tragedy of it. And they expected there'd be an influx of heroin addicts coming back to America. And the reality was, when these soldiers came back to their old lives, they gave up the habit because it was a different environment. So what concern did you have that you'd been on this road of discovery and you could suffer and you had the potential to be an elite athlete, going back to your mum's house? What concern did you have that you'd fall back into?
Letting go of the ego. Letting go of the ego. Because I would say this, that I think this is one of the biggest things that people struggle with the most to overcome when they get released. Like, especially people involved in more high-end criminality. So their whole ego gets wrapped up in this reputation, respect. In their little universe, their bubble, they are the king of their world. And then they don't just want to then be normal and average. And it's how you deal with problems in life when they present themselves. Again, people don't challenge them because of who they are. They got respect, and suddenly you're just a normal person and people will challenge you, and they don't like that. And I remember when I got out, like, if you would have said to me now, when my friend died, 2009, I knew from that night in November, the 14th, I would never commit a crime in my life again. That was me done. I was out, right? They're not just going to let me walk out of prison, but I knew myself I was finished. I'm out of that world.
And these are the conversations I love on the podcast, Damian, because I think they're really life affirming for us to hear that. Like, this guy went from being Britain's most wanted man. If you've not heard the episode, people, please go and find it. He was in the high dependency unit at Belmarsh. He was around suicide bombers and the worst types of disgusting criminals that you can possibly imagine. There's an amazing moment in his book, Redemption, where he talks about, he was almost like Hannibal Lecter, wasn't he? He had his hands and his legs cuffed together, and he was taken through a tunnel to get to the courthouse because he was such an escape risk. There was helicopters and armed police hovering above. He went from that to now being, as Damian said beforehand, a world-class triathlete, going into schools and inspiring the next generation. I think the biggest thing to explain to all of you listening to this is that you are not a fixed being. Where you are today is not where you'll be in 5 years. Where you want to be is somewhere that you can get to. And just have that mindset of growth all the time, even to the point of your ambitions and your plans and your desires. Let those be flexible and fluid as well, because you don't know what's around the corner. You don't know what's coming your way tomorrow. You don't know what opportunities are there. So if you have this rigid, focused mindset with this control of that's where I'm going, I honestly think that you miss the opportunities along the way. Have the open mindset. Have somewhere you want to go, but be flexible about how you get there.
And John's the textbook example of that. I think his whole story is a great example of the 5 stages. So from being a young boy that was being bred into believing that anyone that went and did a conventional job was a mug, to then going and making that leap into the world of criminality, the struggle of coping with the prison system, and then climbing out of it after the death of his friend and starting to feel the benefits of exercise on him, until his arrival of being somebody that's a textbook example of a rehabilitated prisoner that's trying to steer others away from it. I think the message of it is a great example of what you've just said, Jake, about knowing where you want to get to, but just being flexible about the pathways that are going to take us there.
And we're going to finish this episode by hearing from someone who, again, started with very little and has now built a business worth billions. This is the founder of Whoop, Will Ahmed.
The thing that I've taken most from the world's best athletes personally is just the general mindset that they have towards greatness. They do a phenomenal job staying present in the sense that they are hyper focused in the moment on being great. And they don't spend a lot of time really reflecting from a nostalgia standpoint. And in a way, it seems they're almost driven to a fault. And the ones who tend to be happiest in being driven to a fault also have some form of gratitude that they bring into their life. So they're simultaneously hungry and they're on that, dopamine train of I need to win the next thing, while also being grateful for their success.
You know what, Damien? I think that's a brilliant place to end this conversation about the 5 stages of change as we reflect on the season of high performance that we've just delivered for people. And it's only really when I sit and talk about it with you like this that even I'm picking up on lessons that I've missed and things that I hadn't noticed along the way.
Yeah, I think we're both incredibly privileged today, Jake, that we get to sit down with these incredible people that are sharing so generously. These 5 stages of change, even though maybe they don't refer to it in that way, they give us all a route map, a guide about how we can go on our own journey to achieve high performance in our lives. So it's been a real privilege to sit down and reflect on it.
Damian, I've enjoyed it. I've loved your company every single step of the way. You ask the best questions, mate. You ask the best questions.
I wish. No, I love it. I think I really enjoy working with you, Jake, who's, as I've said to you before, I think it's a real privilege to sit alongside you. So thanks for inviting me.
It's a pleasure. And it's a real pleasure as well to share it with so many of you. We know that you're the reason why our book, High Performance Lessons from the Best on Becoming Your Best, is at the top of the charts. We know that you're the reason why we've sold thousands of tickets for the 2022 High Performance Tour already. We know that you're the reason why great guests are keen to come on this podcast, because they understand the reach and the impact. So please understand why Damian and I really thank you for coming on this journey with us on high performance. It means a lot. And it makes a massive difference. And I've said it many times, but we have big plans for the future. So keep on coming back for more people in 2022.
Please hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, give us a thumbs up, leave a review, but somehow get involved with the High Performance Podcast and become part of our growing community.